Good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday, January 10th. Looking at the clock, it's 7 o'clock here in the East, and this is Fox and Friends live in, as you can see, New York City, and over there, that guy's in D.C. Brian will be talking in a second. In the meantime, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis predicting he'll do well in Iowa during last night's exclusive town hall here on Fox. But Fox News power rankings put him behind Nikki Haley as she is now surging in New Hampshire.
Plus, New York City high school students forced to go remote today to make room for nearly 2,000 migrants that are moving into their high school because they were displaced by the storms.
And never too old to look for love. I've always said this. A 93-year-old grandma sharing her dating stories on TikTok.
I went on 5 first dates. I met one at a funeral, and he was cute. I met one at a bar and 2 at bingo.
Nice. Find out which one had what it takes to stick around. Fox and Friends starts right now. And remember to get dressed by the end of the show, and your mornings will always be better with friends. Fox weather alert, a bomb cyclone burying communities in the great Northwest, causing whiteout conditions.
And a cold front sweeping through the Midwest with record snowfall at Des Moines International Airport.
That's right. That slowed down Ron DeSantis yesterday getting to our location. Meanwhile, snowplow drivers are working overtime in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, as the Great Lakes region gets socked. Right now in Madison, Wisconsin, Fox weather correspondent Max Gordon is standing by where it looks like they've cleared the streets behind you, Max.
Yeah, the plows are out this morning. It is frigid, and people are digging out after a winter wallop hammered the region yesterday and the day before. Here in Madison, Wisconsin, a snow emergency was declared. This after this same storm system dumped nearly a foot of snow across the Great Plains. That includes in Des Moines, Iowa. These are pictures from Des Moines. The state received record amounts of snow as Republican presidential candidates make their last push before the Iowa caucuses. The winter weather caused trouble for air traffic. Hundreds of flights were either canceled or delayed over the past 2 days across hubs in the Midwest and Great Plains due to rain, wind, and snow. Road conditions deteriorated in Wisconsin on Tuesday with winds gusting between 30 to 40 miles per hour across the state. Some roads became snow-covered and visibility dropped down in some spots. Still, some Wisconsinites have been taking the wintry blast in stride.
Well, we live in Wisconsin, so this is what we signed up for. But, you know, the frozen tundra, we'll take it. Worst fear, though, is the roads are icy and slippery.
And out west, another storm is already marching its way across the country. More than 100,000 people lost power on Tuesday across the mountains of western Washington and Oregon as a bomb cyclone brought high winds and feet of snow. That same storm system is going to make its way across the Great Plains, and eventually it's going to make its way here to the Midwest by the end of the week. Guys, back to you.
All right, Max Gordon, not far from the capital there in Madison, Wisconsin. Thank you very much. Fox Weather is your winter storm headquarters. Stream it on your favorite connected device. Fox Weather will cover you all weekend long for another nor'easter. Always on, always free, 24/7. By the way, that particular storm we're talking about is the reason Lawrence is not here. He was flying back from the southern border. His plane into New York City diverted. He's waking up today in Boston. And Ron DeSantis last night had trouble flying into Des Moines. Less than an hour before the event, the town hall at 6 p.m. Eastern time, he still hadn't landed. And the worry was he wasn't going to make it, but he did.
Martha and Brett had a town hall with Nikki Haley on Monday. Then they had one last night with Ron DeSantis. And then there's one tonight with Donald Trump at 9 p.m. if you want to watch that, Brian.
Yeah, so let's check this out. Governor Ron DeSantis went after Nikki Haley. We know that on one thing when Nikki Haley said, yeah, Iowa goes first, and then New Hampshire corrects it. Also brought up the Civil War faux pas. Doesn't feel as though she's strong enough on the border. Talked about her links to China. These guys have been sparring about this over the last 6 weeks. Here's a little of Ron DeSantis last night.
well here. Like I said, you got to win a majority of the delegates. And people will sometimes say, oh, well, you know, you're trying to do Iowa, but most people that win Iowa haven't won the nomination, and then vice versa. You can always slice this. This is a long process. I've answered questions from everyone in all corners of the state. These other candidates, you know, Donald Trump's not been willing to come and answer your questions. Donald Trump's running for his issues. Nikki Haley's running for her donors' issues. I'm running for your issues, your family's issues, and to turn this country around. And that's my sole focus.
Tom Massie and Chip Roy going hard for their former colleague in the House. He feels as though he's going to have a good showing in Iowa. Guys, it's pretty clear he has to. He didn't really put any emphasis on New Hampshire. He doesn't have much traction in South Carolina, and we'll see how much money's left for Super Tuesday unless he does exceedingly well. But it looks like on almost all the polls, he's 20 points away. But, guys, it's a different story in New Hampshire.
Well, actually, I was going to say, Brian, it's a different story in Iowa because the one thing about the polling, when they ask registered voters whether or not they're going to vote for somebody, they'll say, yeah, I'm going to vote for him. But the big question is who's going to actually show up on Monday night, because you've got to do it in person. 7 o'clock Central Time on Monday, people have got to be in one of 1,500 precinct locations, gathering spots in Iowa. And the big question is, who has got the best ground game to get people out? And that is where Ron DeSantis, it looks like he's actually got the advantage. Even though his number in Iowa, he's currently at 19% in the popular polls, but his Iowa Super PAC has organized, they've knocked on the doors of 812,000 Iowa homes, according to the Des Moines Register. That was through late December. And then yesterday in the Des Moines Register, they talked about how he has found and located and gotten pledges from 1,600 caucus captains and canvassers who are going to turn out people. Apparently, they've pledged to either bring 5 or 10 people with them to the caucuses, and they've enlisted 517 people who love Ron DeSantis to actually speak at the caucuses on Monday night. Because once a candidate is viewed as not viable, where they get less than 15%, they say, oh, you people who wanted that person, these people are going to make speeches on behalf of the other candidates to see if you can get them to vote for them.
And the weather's supposed to be pretty bad on Monday in Iowa, like one of the coldest days that they've seen in, I think, a decade or a very long time, which could help Donald Trump because he's up in the polls there in Iowa. Ron DeSantis has gone to all 99 counties there. Last night he said he's never going to put troops, American troops, in to fight with Ukraine or fight Ukraine or help Ukraine. He said he would love to run against Joe Biden. He says, I will run him ragged all over this country. And he's been saying he's going to win in Iowa, but last night he said we're going to do very well here. Right. He was interrupted by protesters. It was pretty funny because the Fox security guys were on those individuals who came out yelling no oil money in the middle of the town hall last night. Fox security runs over. They get all those guys out. It was a little blip. It wasn't even a long interruption. And Ron DeSantis says, well, you guys, that was a mistake. You didn't get that one right. And the crowd laughed, and he went on with his answer, the abortion answer. But you're right, Brian, like you said earlier, it's a different story in New Hampshire. If you look at these polls, this is the CNN poll. It's a CNN University of New Hampshire poll. It says that Trump is still in first place, 39%. But look at Nikki Haley, Brian. She's really gaining some ground. Right. She's now 32%.
You know what part of the reason is? Trump's got the Republican support, right? But when you're an independent, you're an undecided, you can vote in this, pick a primary, Democrat or Republican. There's no Democratic primary, so they're all going for Republicans. Haley leads 40 percentage points. Trump leads among conservatives by 40. 37 from registered Republicans. 17 people without college degrees. But here's where Haley surges. She tops Trump by 42 points among moderates, 26 points with undeclared voters, and 12 among college graduates. This is why her numbers are so strong in the general, because that looks more like the general election, but that's because New Hampshire's a little bit different. And I think in the long run, they're going to say that Governor Sununu had a real positive effect on this race for Nikki Haley.
Right. And regarding Nikki Haley surging, yesterday she picked up, and we're going back to Iowa because it's next up. Haley picked up an endorsement of a longtime Iowa GOP GOP donor and fundraiser, a fellow by the name of Cam Sutton. He'd been a fundraiser for Trump in 2020. He said essentially he's putting his money and his support behind Nikki, who, you know, the whole thing about elections is you want to surge at the end. She is surging in New Hampshire. The big question is, who can get out the vote on Monday night in Iowa?
There's pressure on Chris Christie to drop out. If I'm Chris Christie, I don't do it. He earned it. He's been all over New Hampshire. He's got 12 points, a solid third. But they're saying, Chris, if you drop out, they could beat Trump. And, you know, I don't, if I'm Chris Christie, I've worked too hard to get here. Well, I'd like to see how it do. Right.
Chris Christie from my home state of New Jersey, he's worked hard, but he's just been campaigning in that state. He's been essentially a one-state candidate. And he's a great soundbiter, but if he does not do well coming up 2 weeks from yesterday, I bet he does drop out.
I think what is so interesting that Ron DeSantis is doing well in Iowa, but getting 5% according to this poll in New Hampshire. That's strange.
Right. Exactly. All right, there's so much to talk about. It's so interesting. We're finally going to get some results instead of speculation. We're just days away. Coming up, calls for transparency after Secretary Austin's cancer diagnosis was described as elective.
And Boeing CEO owning their mistake after the near disaster in midair on the MAX 9. But how can something like this even happen? We're going to talk to a former head of the FAA about the safety checks that planes go through.
Plus, coming up,
We are back with your headlines. Former First Lady Melania Trump announcing that her mother has died. Amalia Naves passing away in Florida following a long health battle. The former First Lady posting a tribute on social media saying, "We will miss her beyond measure and continue to honor and love her legacy." Amalia Naves was 78 years old. The man caught on camera attacking a Las Vegas judge last week is now facing multiple charges, including attempted murder and extortion. Deobra Redden arriving to his hearing yesterday surrounded by guards while wearing extra restraints. He's expected to appear in court again on February 14th. The career criminal was already sentenced to 4 years behind bars for a separate felony battery charge on Monday. And in Washington, Dr. Anthony Fauci was on Capitol Hill yesterday for a closed-door hearing, and some lawmakers, they were shocked by his testimony. 2 congressmen on the House Select Subcommittee on the pandemic say Fauci told them he's not convinced that kids suffered learning losses from those long school closures. Just look at the test scores. Dr. Fauci. Lawmakers in California are considering banning tackle football for kids under 12 years old. Advocates supporting the ban say it is an effort to protect kids from brain damage. If it's approved, this would be the first ever state ban on youth tackle football in the United States. Those are your headlines, guys. Over to you.
Okay.
That's interesting. Brian, as our sports guy, what do you think about that?
I don't think it's good. I think kids learn to tackle young. It's a technique like anything else. You start off with flag. If you talk to some of these youth football leagues, the ones that are well coached, it's really important to get that technique down young. Although that is a game you can pick up late in life. So I would talk to football coaches along with doctors, because that's the way to handle this.
All right, thank you. All right, we also have this developing story out of Washington where Brian is right now. The Pentagon and the White House are responding to the backlash after calling Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's prostate cancer procedure an elective surgery.
We have elected to speak to Lucas Tomlinson. He is live in D.C. with the very latest. Lucas.
Well, good morning, guys. Another chapter in the Lloyd Austin saga. Many people asking this morning, when is removing cancer from your body elective surgery? White House officials say not only were they left in the dark about the defense secretary's absence last week, they didn't know it was cancer until yesterday.
Nobody at the White House knew that Secretary Austin had prostate cancer until this morning, and the president was informed immediately after we were.
Of course, accountability has always been the hallmark of military service. Critics wondering why the former general, 4-star general and head of the U.S. Central Command, did not notify the White House he would be under anesthesia and unable to take calls when under the knife. Speaking of CENTCOM in the Middle East yesterday, guys, Iran's proxy forces in Yemen launched its largest drone and missile strike to date. It took 3 U.S. warships and a British destroyer to shoot down 21 drones and missiles. And for only the 3rd time in history, F-18 Super Hornets from Ike scored air-to-air kills. Now back to the Pentagon. Officials admit they botched this issue with Austin.
I think, again, we recognize the need to be better when it comes to transparency. And as a senior DoD public affairs official, I will work very hard with our senior staff to make sure that we're doing due diligence and meeting the standard that the public expects and has communicated very loudly throughout this process.
The White House says it's launching a review for cabinet protocols, and the Republican chairman of the House Armed Services Committee has launched an investigation himself. Guys?
Lucas, the review that they're doing, it sounds like the review is being was ordered by Austin C. Chief of Staff Kelly Magnuson. And she kind of is being thrown under the bus because she was blamed for the breakdown in the notification because when she was told she had the flu. So now she's ordering, hey, we got to figure this out. We can't let this happen again. Are they throwing her under the bus?
You know, in Washington, you always need a fall guy, of course, Steve. Though, when you're dealing with these basic issues of accountability, you know, what would happen if you didn't show up for work for 4 days? Think somebody would notice, Steve? Of course. An Army private who doesn't show up for work for formation, morning quarters formation in the morning, certainly he would know. His senior NCO would be probably grabbing him from the rack and demanding, get to work. So a lot of questions today about why somebody so senior would do this.
Right, and you brought up, to me in the break, that he's a four-star general. Yeah. And if you're a private and you disappear for a week and a half and don't tell your superiors what you're doing, what happens to that private?
It's called AWOL, away without leave, or UA if you're in the Marines or the Navy, Brian. You get in trouble.
Does it surprise you, Lucas, that the President of the United States, off for a week in the Caribbean with some rich guy, didn't need to speak to the Secretary of Defense or the Pentagon for 10 days?
Certainly says a lot about their relationship, Brian. The fact that they didn't speak for 4 days, the president didn't know he was out. You'd think the president's speaking to Anthony Blinken every day, probably multiple times a day. Certainly Jake Sullivan, whose office is there in the White House, you know they talk multiple times a day. The fact that Lloyd Austin was not communicating with the president appears for days and nobody knew. It's not a good sign when you're out for that long and nobody even knows you're missing.
I thought about that too, Brian and Lucas and Steve, that Joe Biden didn't know, and he just found out yesterday that he had cancer. You would think that if he's working as one of his cabinet members, that he would be told that for national security purposes, but also as a friend. I mean, I would want to know.
Right, absolutely. And the White House says his job is not in jeopardy. They have complete confidence in this guy.
Should be.
Which is ridiculous because Joe Biden is in more hot water now because of this. But the Pentagon says he will not resign, and no one working for him has offered to resign.
Well, he also was under anesthesia. So if you don't notify your second in command when you're going under, that's a problem.
Well, they told that lady who had the flu. Let's see what happens. All right.
And just put out the statement on December 22nd that I'm going under surgery for cancer surgery. No one, you'd get nothing but sympathy, you'd think.
Yeah, 100%. And just put
100%.
somebody in charge.
Yeah.
Lucas, thank you very much. All right, just nod. There you go. All right, coming up on this Wednesday, school's out in one New York City high school as students are forced to stay home and study remotely to make room for migrants. We're going to have a live report from the school coming up next.
Migrants moving into their high school. Plus, just 5 days away from the high-stakes caucuses, DeSantis and Haley make their pitch to Iowa voters.
I'm a good mom and a good wife, I'll be a good ambassador. If I'm a good mom and a good wife, I'll be a good president.
I'm the candidate who's most in tune with the values here of Iowa Republicans.
It's the final countdown. All right, 29 minutes after the hour. Teen students in New York City forced out of the classroom to make room for thousands of migrants. Fox Business correspondent Madison Allworth joins us live from outside James Madison High School, where the students are learning on Zoom today. Madison, why is that?
Brian, they're learning on Zoom today because this high school is the newest shelter overnight for migrants. So James Madison High School behind me, class should be in session, but instead we had 2,000 migrants from Floyd Bennett Field. They arrived here last night. We have some of that video that I want to show you as well. So those migrants located at Floyd Bennett Field, which is a shelter, a HERC center that is run by that is opened by the state, run by the city. When it was opened, there was concerns that there would be issues with flooding and with wind. Those concerns, they played out yesterday as we saw major storms hit New York. So yesterday, 1 day advance notice, the parents of around 4,000 students were informed that their kids would not be able to come to school because their school would be used as a shelter overnight. Now, we reached out to the mayor's office. I want to give you part of the statement that they provided to us. They said, quote, "The relocation will continue until any weather conditions that may arise have stabilized and the facility is once again fit for living." So what we're hearing is that James Madison High School shelter last night. The migrants are supposed to be moved out today, but if they will be going back to Floyd Bennett Field, that's still up in the air as we continue to see bad weather. I want to bring in Councilmember Arreola. You look at the situation here. It seems like a bad setup with Floyd Bennett Field, now having a bad solution, kicking kids out and putting them on remote learning. What does this say about our ability to take care of migrants and handle the crisis here in New York?
From day one, we've said that Floyd Bennett Field was not the proper place for a migrant-based camp because of its open area, because there are no barriers between any type of climate event and the migrants that would be there. And last night proved everything to be true that we've been saying from day one. It is unfair that we had to move 2,000 migrants into a school, disrupt the education of 4,000 students, just to have to do it again if there is another storm. And I'm going to take away if, and I'm going to say when there is another storm.
Councilmember, thank you so much. Great to meet you. Thank you so much. So, I mean, Brian, there you have it. The reality is, while this still remains a shelter, this possibility of relocation continues to be a very real threat.
So when the mayor asked for help from the federal government, they said, hey, why don't you lose Floyd Bennett Field? And he said, okay, we don't want to. The migrants, when they got off the bus, saw Floyd Bennett Field, they wanted to get back on the bus. And now it's the state's problem now. The state's supposed to be running that place, correct?
That's correct. So it is a federal piece of land. The state had to get permission from the federal government, and it is now being run by the city. So we have the federal government involved, the state involved, as well as the city involved. And the reality is it is incredibly isolated. It is a dangerous area, and there are 2,000 people living there. And it's not just adult males at this facility. You have men, women, and children. So these were children in the middle of last night that were moved during a storm into a school only to be woken up early again to be moved. It's constant shuffling, and the facility at Floyd Bennett Field, what we're hearing, is still operational and opening. So they will be going back there to this unsustainable situation.
Wow. Madison, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Ainsley, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Brian. The Iowa caucuses are only 5 days away. It happens on Monday, and presidential hopefuls Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis have made some of their final pitches to the voters in our Fox News town halls. Watch.
If I'm a good mom and a good wife, I'll be a good governor. If I'm a good mom and a good wife, I'll be a good ambassador. If I'm a good mom and a good wife, I'll be a good president.
I'm the candidate who's most in tune with the values here of Iowa Republicans. And I think if you're a conservative, I'm your guy. Vote for me in the caucus, and you can make history.
And here, with which way they're leaning, are Iowa voters. We have Dennis Raymond, we have Jasmine Jordan in the middle, and we have Kara Cruz on the very end. Good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here. So, Jasmine, I know you're a Trump voter, and you're a junior at University of Iowa. That's awesome that you're getting so involved at a young age. Trump's town hall is tonight with Martha and Brett. So I'll come back to you in a minute. But Jasmine, you really, Kara, you really like DeSantis. You have 3 children, ages 9, 10, and 12. Why is DeSantis your pick?
Well, I just, in meeting the two of them, when they came to Bettendorf, I got a sense of their family values. They brought the kids. The kids were front and center. Got to talk to them. Very cute. I think that his value system, you know, when Casey was talking about her husband, she said he puts on the coat of God, the armor of God, to protect himself from all the barbs that get thrown at him on a daily basis. And who better to look to for protection than God? I feel that their value system is in line with my family's, and I think his governance has proven itself. I just think he's the best candidate out there.
Okay, Dennis, you're in farm management, you're real estate, you're in real estate as well, and your pick is Nikki Haley. Why is that?
Well, I like Nikki for her background, her experience as far as governorship plus gives her some good global experience going into the job of presidency, which we certainly need you know, it's not a beginner's job. So we've got to have that. She's also got, you know, some military through her husband. I believe that the economy grew well in South Carolina while she was governor there. I just think she checks a lot of boxes. When she enters the room, she's in control. I like the way she handles herself.
Okay, Jasmine, thank you so much. Jasmine, you really like Donald Trump. Tell me why.
Yes, I think Donald Trump is the biggest free speech advocate out of all the candidates. And, you know, if we don't have free speech, we don't really get much of the other freedoms that have been given to us in our Constitution. I feel like the other two candidates, they're inconsistent, their actions don't match their words, and they even refuse to hear from the other side. And that's crucial because so many different viewpoints make up our country and they all have the right to be heard.
All right, Dennis, Jasmine, Kara, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having
We
us.
wish you all the best on Monday. It's the first caucus throughout our country this election cycle. Coming up, Fox Weather Alert. Look at this video. Total devastation as tornadoes rip through the Florida Panhandle, and all 50 states are seeing extreme weather. Janice is tracking it all. And Boeing's CEO owning up to their mistake after the near disaster in midair. But how can something like this even happen? We're going to ask a former head of the Federal Aviation Administration coming up next. And
đường này nó sẽ trùng với lại cái phần ở giữa này nha. Đấy, như thế này. Rồi các bạn sẽ biết cái phần này lại cho mình nha. Này, các bạn sẽ biết lại. Đấy, các bạn sẽ biết lại cho mình này. Sau đó các bạn sẽ mở ra. Đây. Rồi bên này các bạn cũng sẽ gấp tương tự như vậy nha. Các bạn chỉ gấp cái phần này xuống nè, sẽ cho cái đường đây nó sẽ trùng với lại cái đường ở giữa này. Đấy. Rồi các bạn sẽ biết cái phần này lại cho mình. Đấy. Rồi các bạn sẽ miết cái phần này lại cho mình. Đây, miết cái phần này lại nè. Đấy. Sau đó thì các bạn sẽ mở cái phần giấy này ra. Đây. Tiếp theo thì các bạn sẽ gấp cái phần giấy này. Mình sẽ mở ra. Các bạn sẽ dùng ngón trỏ nè. Các bạn ép phần giấy nó xuống. Đây, mình đẩy giấy này lên. Rồi gấp lại cho mình. Đấy, như thế này. Rồi bên này cũng vậy nha các bạn. Mình sẽ mở ra. Mình sẽ gấp phần giấy này xuống. Các bạn đẩy phần giấy này lên. Rồi bớt sao cho nó vô được cái phần nếp ở chỗ này nha các bạn. Đấy, như đây. Đây, các bạn sẽ gấp lên cho mình. Đây. Tiếp theo thì cái phần giấy này nè, bạn sẽ gấp lên luôn. Các bạn sẽ gấp ngay chỗ đây này, cho nó chạm vào cái phần giấy ở đây các bạn. Đấy, cho nó chạm vào cái phần giấy ở giữa này nè. Bạn sẽ gấp về cho mình nha. Đấy, bạn sẽ gấp lên. Đây. Cắt lên như thế này. Và cái phần này các bạn sẽ ép nó vào lại cái phần nếp lúc đầu. Đấy. Về phần này này, bạn cũng sẽ đẩy vào. Đấy. Như thế này nha các bạn. Đây, như thế này. Thì cái phần chân ở phía sau của con mèo nó sẽ như thế này nha các bạn. Tiếp theo thì các bạn sẽ gấp cái phần giấy này nè. Đấy. Các bạn sẽ gấp vào. Đấy, phần giấy này. Các bạn sẽ gấp vào cho nó chạm phần chân ngay đây thôi nha các bạn. Cứ chạm vào ngay đây thôi. Đấy, sẽ gấp lên như thế này nha các bạn. Sau đó thì ở cái phần giấy này này, mình sẽ gấp xíu lên. Đây, như thế này. Rồi bên này, bạn chỉ gấp xíu lên. Đấy. Rồi các bạn sẽ nhớ cái phần này cái chân thật là chắc đi giúp mình nha, để nó thẳng ra. Đây, như thế này. Đấy, về cái con mèo của mình nó có thể nhảy như thế này các bạn. Đây. Đấy, thì mình sẽ bóp cho nó phần này nó chắc là một tí nữa nha. Phần này này. Đây. Về ở cái phần đây thì bây giờ mình sẽ bắt đầu mình sẽ vẽ mắt mũi cho nó nha. Đây, thì đầu tiên này các bạn sẽ vẽ một cái hình tròn bên này và bên này. Đây, thì các bạn sẽ vẽ cho mình một hình tròn ở đây và một hình tròn ở đây nha. Đây, như thế này. Tiếp theo thì các bạn sẽ vẽ một hình tròn to ở trên hai phần này. Đấy, các bạn sẽ vẽ hai cái hình tròn ở trên này này. Sau đó các bạn sẽ tô ở cái vòng tròn ở ngoài thôi. Đây, thì các bạn sẽ vẽ thêm hai cái hình tròn nhỏ ở dưới này. Đấy, hai hình tròn nhỏ ở dưới như thế này. Sau đó các bạn sẽ tô ở vòng tròn, ở cái phần ở ngoài lớn nhất thôi. Mình sẽ tô lại cho mình. Đấy, các bạn sẽ tô lại từ từ cho mình. Đây, như thế này nha các bạn. Ở bên này, các bạn cũng sẽ tô tương tự như vậy giúp mình. Đây, như thế này nha các bạn. Tiếp theo thì các bạn sẽ vẽ cái phần mũi và miệng cho cái con mèo này. Thì trước tiên các bạn sẽ vẽ cho mình một cái hình tam giác ngay đây. Đây, các bạn sẽ vẽ cho mình một cái hình tam giác ở đây. Sau đó các bạn sẽ vẽ về bao góc ở những cái phần đỉnh của cái hình tam giác nha. Đây, như thế này nha các bạn. Tiếp theo thì các bạn sẽ vẽ một cái đường dài đi xuống. Và các bạn sẽ vẽ hai đường cong ở hai bên. Mình sẽ tạo ra được cái phần khung miệng của cái con mèo nha. Đây, các bạn sẽ vẽ xuống một đường như thế này cho mình. Và các bạn sẽ vẽ hai cái đường cong hai bên. Đây, bạn sẽ vẽ hai đường cong hai bên này. Đấy, thì nó sẽ ra được một cái phần miệng cái miệng của con mèo nha. Tiếp theo thì ở hai cái phần nhọn bên đây này, các bạn sẽ vẽ hai cái gạch cho mình. Đây, bạn sẽ vẽ thêm một gạch nữa nha. Đây, như thế này nha các bạn. Tiếp theo thì sẽ là ở phần bên này. Đấy, các bạn cũng sẽ vẽ như vậy luôn. Đây, như thế này nha các bạn. Tiếp theo thì các bạn sẽ làm cái phần đuôi cho cái con mèo của mình nha. Các bạn sẽ dùng cái phần giấy ở đây này, các bạn sẽ cắt một cái phần đuôi. Đây, các bạn sẽ cắt một cái phần giấy như thế này nha mọi người. Đây, về các bạn sẽ gắn vào cái phần sau đây của con mèo này. Đây, các bạn sẽ gắn vào cái kia đây, sẽ gắn vào, rồi các bạn sẽ mở ra. Đây. Đây, như thế này. Đây. Đây. Về cái con mèo bằng giấy của mình để hoàn thành rồi nha các bạn. Rồi mình xin kết thúc video tại đây. Và mình xin hẹn gặp lại các bạn ở một cái video kế tiếp. Mình sẽ hướng dẫn các bạn cách làm một cái con vật nào đó bằng giấy. Ok. Xin chào và hẹn gặp lại.